If you're a student at university or college, what's the best way of developing yourself personally and professionally alongside your studies? Also, what's the benefit of having a mentor at this early stage of your development? We'll find out in today's episode. Welcome to Half Hour Mentor. My name is Ian Cleverdon, and welcome to the 5th episode in the series in which I talk to notable figures from a variety of different backgrounds with a view to supporting you in your personal and professional development. Today, my guest is Shuab Gamote, Project Officer with Manchester Metropolitan University, having graduated there with a first-class honours degree in Accounting and Finance in 2022. Some of the feedback I received in my research for this series was that whilst it's great to hear from successful business leaders, it would also be good to learn from those at the start of their careers and how they've handled the early stages of their development. Having reflected on my interview with Shuab, I think today's episode is a masterclass in this area, and there's something for everyone to learn from in his approach to development and motivation. You can find this series on all major streaming platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube. Be sure to click on the follow or subscribe button to make sure you don't miss out on hearing from my future guests. It'll also be great if you could rate and review the podcasts, as it really helps me understand how they're being received. And do spread the word with your friends and colleagues if you're enjoying them. You can also provide feedback and learn about future episodes on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook by searching for Half Hour Mentor. So let's crack on with the interview with Shuab. Let's go back to your teenage years. What did you want to do when you were at school, for example?
I think going back to my teenage years, I remember the first job that I really wanted and I thought about in quite a bit of detail was to be a teacher. I wanted to be a primary school teacher. And I think probably the main reason for that was, the majority of my role models, especially when you're in school, you find are teachers. So I really respected my teachers and the teachers that I liked, loved what they did. So I thought, okay, let me think about going into teaching. What will I need to do to become a teacher? So obviously you need a degree to become a teacher, but also I thought, I was lucky enough to go to a sixth form college and a high school as well. So when I was in my first year of sixth form, we have a primary school as well. So I went to the primary school and I did a 1 week's work experience. And I found that I do not like working with kids, essentially. So quite quickly I realised that wasn't particularly going to be the route for me. So that's probably the first thing that I wanted to do.
Right. That's interesting. What was it about, without wanting to offend any children listening, what was it that you didn't like or turned you off about that from your original thought is that's what you want to do?
I think I just realised that what I really enjoy doing is working with people and talking to people a lot. But when you're a teacher, you're almost by yourself with these kids, even though you're not working alone. For the majority, especially primary school teachers, the majority of the time, you're going to be working with a group of 20, 25, 30 kids. Maybe there's a teaching assistant there as well, but you're going to be by yourself and you kind of have to deal with it. And I'm sure there's a lot of elements to it which are enjoyable, but I just realised that I really liked that camaraderie and working in a team. And I realised that quite early on, I think, because in high school and in college, I got involved in stuff like Model United Nations, a Young Enterprise Challenge, where I worked as part of a team. And that's what I really enjoyed doing.
What drove you to get proactively involved in all of those activities?
I think I wasn't the best of students in regards to pure education and pure learning from a book. I realised quite late in life, to be fair, probably in university / final year of college, that I had ADHD, and I already knew that I was dyslexic. So I didn't really know how I liked to learn. And I think the main reason I thought that was because obviously the normal way of teaching is you come into a classroom, you listen for 30 minutes, and then you go ahead and you do your activities alone. And I realised quite early on in life that firstly I liked more interactive lessons, and so the likes of drama I really enjoyed, or studying politics in A level, because it's you have to talk and go through your opinions. I really enjoyed them subjects, but in terms of other subjects like maths or English or science, it was much more of a chore for me. I had to really try to understand and I had to really try to concentrate and put effort in. So the reason I enjoyed doing all the extracurricular activities were I was probably one of the worst students in the classroom in regards to always trying to distract the teacher and talk, make the teacher talk about their personal lives. But when it came to extracurricular activities like the Young Enterprise Challenge or Model United Nations, and I could think of countless others, I really enjoyed them. And whenever there was an opportunity in any subject, whether I enjoyed the subject or not, to do a team project after school or do an extracurricular activity, I jumped right in.
So you then went on to university. Tell us about that journey. What drove you to go to university?
I think university was always part of the plan. From when I was younger, I think the fact that my brother went and moved to Newcastle when I was 9 or 10, and I used to think to myself, I really want to do that. I really want to go to university. I had a bit of a stumble in college, in my first year of college, where I thought, is education really for me? I was really struggling in topics at that time, so I did quite well in maths and maths and science in my GCSEs. So naturally, my parents were like, you need to do maths and sciences for your A-levels. And I was miserable doing them. I was absolutely miserable I was studying maths, physics, and chemistry, and I hated it. And I started to really consider whether, education was the route for me, or, should I go and do an apprenticeship? And apprenticeships were really becoming popular back then, and a lot of people coming to our school to talk to us about apprenticeships. But then later on, I picked subjects in my A-levels that I really enjoyed, and I realised that, university is, it really has the opportunity to change someone's life. And I think it's a life-changing experience in regards to not only do you get a degree, but all these social activities that you can get involved in. I really want to do that. So I did my A-levels, and during my A-levels, I heard about the First Generation Scheme, which is essentially just a scholarship scheme, which is not just money, but also loads of extra advice and support, such as going to a summer school and getting support in your personal statement. And that kind of really drove me to choose MMU as well. So I knew I wanted to go to university, ideally run away from Manchester, run away from my parents, get a bit of freedom. But in the end, I fell in love with MMU, I fell in love with Manchester Met, and I decided to stay here, and it was the rest is all history.
So you went to Manchester Metropolitan University, and what did you study?
I studied accounting and finance.
Which has got an element of mathematics involved in it.
I know. So I think the way that I came to that decision, I think, was I've always been, I realised that during school that I'm much more motivated when I've got an end goal. And I picked my degree with that in mind as well. So the way I picked accounting and finance was a company came to our school and said, you can come to our offices and look around. So we went to the offices of, I think it was BDO, and just looking around at the free coffee machine and the incredible building, and seeing people in amazing suits walking around, and thinking to myself, I want this to be me. So I knew that I wanted to go into kind of the professional services kind of sector and the services sector, and I picked accounting and finance because it was a secure route, and I literally Googled one of the most secure routes and good pay and good money, and accounting and finance was one of them. If you're a business owner, you don't want to get rid of your accountant until the very end, are you?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about university then. You got to university, yeah. You're starting studying accounting and finance. You've already demonstrated about you throwing yourself into extracurricular activities, and I guess from my understanding that is what you continue to do at university. So tell us a little bit about how you thought you'd develop yourself. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I came into university through the First Generation Scheme, so I already knew quite a bit about the university. So from day one, I was really lucky to kind of feel comfortable and feel like I belonged at Manchester Metropolitan University. So from day one, I got involved in things. I went straight to the Students' Union at Freshers' Fair. And so I'm from Somaliland, so I joined the Somali Society, and then about a couple of months in did a hostile takeover and became president in my first year. So I realised that I was doing the majority of the work, so I should get the title as well.
Right, let's just wind back on that one then. How did you get to be president of a society in your first year at university?
So essentially, I was walking around the Freshers' Fair with my friend at the time, and she still is, who was also studying accounting and finance. And I went to to the Somali Society desk and said, yeah, I'm really interested in this. I want to get involved in it. And my friend, gassed me up a little bit, said how amazing I was. And they were like, do you know what? We're actually looking for committee members. So why don't you join the committee? And I was like, okay, I'll join the committee. So I became, I think it was the projects secretary or whatever it may be. And I was in charge of essentially putting events on, events manager basically. And then, we did 3 or 4 events in the first couple of months. And I'm not being very humble here, but I did the majority of the work. And I think other people in the society kind of realised that. So there was my friend who I met on the society, who's actually a massive part of my university experience, Musa. I met him while I was a part of the committee, and we became friends, and he was pushing me to kind of become president because I was doing the majority of the work, and I think the president at the time was in their final year of studies and they were very busy. So I did just that. I spoke to the president and she said reluctantly she agrees with me, and I became president, and I think that was before January, so it was quite...
Wow.
First couple of months, yeah.
So beginning of term 2 of year 1.
Yeah.
He's president of a society. That is amazing.
Yeah.
Great. What else did you do within that first year? What other experiences did you have?
So I got involved in the society and de facto got involved in the union, the students' union, quite a bit. So I made a lot of friends in the students' union, and through the society, I mentioned Musa and how he played a massive part in my life, or my university life, in my first year in particular. He was in his final year of studies, had a difficult first couple of years, but really started to get into the groove of things. And he used to tell me all about different things and introduce me to other third-year students. So, I was in the library, I was in the students' union study space once, and it was election time at the Students' Union, and I was trying to push some people to run for election. So I convinced 3 people to run for election, and I was like, don't worry, I study politics, I'll be a campaign manager. So I thought,
so this was going to be your campaign, they were going to be your campaign manager?
No, I was going to be their campaigin manager.
Gotcha.
Initially, yeah. So I thought, okay, I can't run for student union office in my first year. It's a full-time job.
Right.
Or so I thought. But so I convinced them to run, so that we had a sports officer there, we had a wellbeing officer, an education officer, and a societies and development officer. So we had 4 officers, and we were missing the big one. So we were looking for a president, and then I got an email from someone recommending me to run for election. So I went to the Students' Union office and I said, can I run in my first year? And they were like, yes. So I did just that. I joined the slate. We had a full slate. So I went from campaign manager to being the president of that slate of students. So we ran for office. We put everything into our campaign, made an amazing video with my brother's friend, who was an amazing videographer. Got loads of people to volunteer on our campaign and go around campus and convince students. And I learned so much from the experience, just kind of, selling myself essentially and selling my team to different students and getting turned down and all of that. And, I think if you can go up to someone on the street and try to convince them of something, you can pretty much do anything, really. So unfortunately, we all came second. We lost by around about 200 or 300 votes to the incumbent slate. All five of them slate members were already in office. So we already knew that we had quite a tough challenge, but it was really close. And it was, the Students' Union was saying how it was one of the most successful election campaigns that they've ever had because it was so competitive and so many people got involved. After the election loss, I was a bit disappointed, but I had a lot of other things that I could get involved in, and being a part of the first generation team was one of them. So I became an ambassador for the first generation team, which is essentially just a part-time job. And through that, I got involved in an organisation called 1 Million Mentors, just by saying yes to, will you go to this event, for the 1 Million Mentors event and represent the first generation students? And I said yes. And I met the CEO of that organisation called 1 Million Mentors. And then after that, got invited to speak in the House of Commons, which is essentially just me in a very small room within a now shadow minister, and 3 or 4 other, really high up and prestige people from across central London.
So let's just stop there and take that in for a minute. You're in your first year at university. Is this a second term, is it?
Second term.
Second term?
Third term.
Third term. but you are now speaking at the House of Commons.
Yes.
On what subject?
Yeah, so I was there to speak about the impact of mentoring. I think at that particular point in time, a lot of young people were having issues with, there's a lot of issues around jobs and job security and getting a job out of graduating. And there's also a lot of stuff going on with youth knife crime. And it was essentially a very bleak picture. I think a lot of the stuff that was being talked about around that time were, how doomed young people were essentially.
And this was pre-pandemic, wasn't it?
Pre-pandemic, yeah. So I went to this event and there was about 10, 15 people in that room, and I remember feeling so out of place. I think I walked into the building and walked into the room, and I was there. I was quite early, so I was one of the first people there. And then at one point, one of the guests who came handed me their jacket. I was wearing a black suit, so they probably thought I was working there. And then, we sat down for dinner, and then I did a short 10, 15 minute speech about my experiences, and I guess I wowed them because they ended up donating a lot of money to the charity.
Right. Wow. How did you feel at that moment of standing up there before you were about to speak? What was going through your mind?
I think people always think that it comes naturally to me. They always think, you're a very comfortable speaker, you're very confident, which to a degree is true, but this has only happened over a long period of time of practicing and doing loads of speaking engagements. But every single time I speak, no matter what it is, even this conversation right now, I get butterflies. I'm always, I always have these little tricks that I use where I move my feet around, but no one can see it. So I felt really nervous in that moment in time. I remember feeling, do I deserve to be here? Which is a question I asked a lot of myself when I was in my late teens. What right do I have to be here, essentially? But with time and in a couple of minutes into every conversation or every speaking engagement I have, I realise and just taking the moment, and I'm always in the moment. And I feel like, athletes talk about this a lot. When they're playing football, when they're playing rugby, they're in the moment and they ignore everything else. And I feel like one of the moments where I always feel like I'm there is when I'm speaking, and I tried not to think about other things. And I'm very lucky to have that natural skill, I guess.
Just one thing that sprung to mind is you've done lots there, and that's just so commendable that you've got involved in that. If I'm a listener to this now, I might be thinking, great, but how did you balance your studies, and how did you balance out the studies that you had to do?
I think one thing that I've kind of realised is I enjoy getting involved in these kind of things, so it doesn't necessarily seem like a chore to me, and it doesn't drain my energy. I think there's a lot of things that I had to do when I was in uni. Not a lot, but quite a few things that I had to do when I was in university or in college that I really didn't enjoy, and it drained the energy out of me. But these were things that I genuinely looked forward to, and I didn't see as a chore. Where other people would be like, well, I could do that, but I'm not that interested in it. But other people have the same opportunities that I did, where I said yes, they said no. I just thought about it as an opportunity to learn and meet new people and try new things. But I guess, the bigger picture of how I balanced the majority of the things that I did while I was in uni were not listening to people when they told me, oh, you can't do that. I remember when I first started my, I think we'll get onto this at some point, but in my third year of university, I worked full-time alongside my studies, and my parents were not impressed initially. They were like, you need to take this seriously, you're underestimating how hard this can be, and a lot of people told me that. But I actually had a conversation with, I'm name dropping here, I had a conversation with Stephen Bartlett in the gym, and I mentioned, it was at the very start of the year, just before I started my final year of studies, where I said, I'm making a great mistake here, everyone's telling me it's going to be tough. And he kind of stopped me right there and said to me, if everyone was willing to do it and could do it, then it wouldn't hold the same value. And I just thought about that as a challenge, and it kind of keeps me motivated and keeps me going, was the fact that what I'm doing is really tough. Therefore, it's, in this case for me in particular, it was worthwhile. So that kind of motivated me to make sure that I got things in order. And I think when you go through these tough experiences, they're not easy. and I can try to paint an easy picture. It wasn't easy. It was a lot of, very early mornings going to the library before work, in the evening after work going to the library, taking my holiday days and not going on holiday, but spending it every couple of weeks before every exam. I'd be in the library from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. But just time management and understanding how you learn as well. I think the reason I enjoyed my university degree so much and I was able to do well in it was because for the first time in my life, quite late on, I learned how to revise. I learned how to revise in university, which sounds crazy. And I feel like if I knew how to revise the way I do now in college or in high school, I would have done a lot better. But just understanding that, looking at the person that's getting the A star in your room and how they're doing it might not work for you. I love to learn when I'm fixating on one subject or one area, and that's how I do best. And other people might like to do things slowly throughout the year, but for me, fixating on one topic, looking at accounting or whether it be, corporate reporting and looking at it in detail, that really helps me to, memorize everything that I need to memorize and do well in them exams.
That sounds like a whole different podcast episode looking at how to revise, and probably give me an idea for that one, but that's for the future. You took a placement year as well as part of that, so for those that are listening not aware of that, it's basically taking the third year out of the university. So your degree is spread over 4 years, third year being practice in industry or in a working environment. Tell us a little bit about that. What did you do?
The main thing that I came to university for was to get a job, and I was fixated with this idea of graduating with a job, going to my graduation ceremony and having a job ready for me when I finish. So a placement was really important to me. Getting a placement, I knew, significantly increased your chances of having a graduate job at the end of your university experience. So with that in mind, in my second year of university, I was fixated with all the application processes of all of these massive accounting firms. So I applied for in total about 17 or 18 different positions. I think my second application was to PwC, my dream company at the time. Got through the first stage, which was incredibly tough to get through. The second stage, third stage, got through to the group interviews, got through to the final interview, and messed it up by not being myself in retrospect. But, everything happens for a reason. And even though I didn't get that PwC job, it made me a lot better for my next interview. In total, I got around about 15 rejections. It was really hard to keep on going, but I just knew that I had to. And what really helped me at that time was just listening to other people's experiences and listening to podcasts similar to this one about how people go through these moments of, failure leads to success kind of vibe. So I then got a final interview with GE, General Electric Aviation, huge company, way bigger than PwC. And then my dad drove me up to Scotland, and I was really nervous, and I, memorizing all this information about their different jet engines that they have and all sorts of information. Went to the interview, smashed the interview, got along really well with the hiring manager. 2 days later, got a phone call saying that I got the job. This was February 2020, so you can imagine what happened next. I
think I know what's coming next.
Yeah, the big P word, the pandemic happened. And then, they sent us an email saying, don't worry, everyone else's graduate jobs were getting cancelled and placements were getting cancelled, but they left it really late. So it was April, literally a week before my final exams, that I got an email from HR, literally reading out a script saying that your contract's been terminated. Oh. And I was gutted. I kind of saw it coming, but I was still gutted. But then luckily, all the things that I had been doing at university, this idea that every single person you meet, give a good impression, be nice. Not only because it's nice to be nice, but also because you never know where that person might see you in the future. So my experiences with the union meant that they offered me a job as soon as they found out that my placement got cancelled.
This is in the Students' Union of Manchester Metropolitan University.
Manchester Metropolitan University, right. Yeah. So the same one that I ran for Students' Union election in. Now, just a side note, not that money is the most important thing in the world. If you won the Student Union election, you get paid around £18,000 a year, which is great. But the job that I got on my placement was £22,000 a year. So, you know, if one door closes, a better one might open in the future. So just keep on going is the lesson that I learned there. But yeah, I was lucky enough to start my placement at the Students' Union. It was my first professional job. I remember being really excited to start. But it was such a weird time to start my career because it was during the pandemic. So I was meeting all of my colleagues slowly over a period of a month online. In 2D.
So all of this was online, basically?
My first 8 months of my role was online completely. I don't think I went for a few walks in the park when it was legal, by the way, with colleagues. But other than that, everything was online. It was weird. I was socializing online. We used to have after-work events online. It was everything. Everything in my life was basically run by Zoom at that time. At the end of my placement, I was lucky enough to get offered a job in my final year at university, which I kind of mentioned before, how I was working full-time alongside my full-time studies. So I got a job at the Students' Union, working as a project coordinator, and step in one of my mentors at this point, because I did have a mentor called Mark, and he essentially told me, look, listen, when I was making that decision initially, I was like, can I really work full-time alongside my full-time studies? The answer that I came to personally was yes. He mentioned that he agreed with me, and he agreed with the conclusion that I came to based on the facts that I presented to him. But then he did say one thing which kind of sprung to mind straight away, was you can probably get more out of it. Clearly they're quite desperate for you because you've got a niche set of skills, and it's a very niche project of, you know, there's only a couple of years left. So he said, why don't you push for a promotion and a pay rise? And I was like, well, no, and, you know, I'm very lucky to be offered this opportunity. Why would I push my luck? And he
sorry to interrupt. This is during your final year as well.
Yeah. So this is literally at the end of my placement, the summer before I start my final year of university.
Okay.
I was offered a role by the Students' Union, and then Mark, my mentor, pushed me to ask, how do you think you'll be able to do this job properly? So there was three things that I asked for: a pay rise and a promotion, firstly. Secondly was to ensure that I could get my exams time off. So I would get at least a week before every exam off. They agreed to both of them. And the third one was that I would be working 7 or 8 hours less. I'll still be working full time, but I'd be working 7 or 8 hours less. So with them 7 or 8 hours, I'd get some admin support from a student as well. So I got all three of those things, and I was really surprised. And I remember how nervous I was going into that conversation and thinking they're definitely going to say no. And they just said yes to everything that I asked for, which is another big lesson that I learned quite early on, is that if you don't ask, you don't get. And simple supply and demand. There was a demand for my role and for me to continue the role. So there was also a supply for what I wanted.
Fantastic. And then if we wind to the end of your final year, what grade did you get?
So I ended university with a first. I got an average of 77%.
Wow.
So
as well as for full-time work.
Yeah, as well as a full-time and successfully completing all of my work, all of the things that work wanted me to complete, and I felt like I did my job properly as well, and that was important to me. But yeah, I mean, I remember as soon as I started the year, I was like, I cannot mess this up. I cannot improve.
Got one chance.
Yeah, I got one chance.
Shot at it.
I can't get a 2-1, basically, was it? Because everyone was saying, well, if you get a 2-1, just know that if you weren't working, you would have got a first. So I had to get a first, and I had to get a good start to the year. Luckily, at that point, I met a really good friend who I briefly knew in first year. Really, like, barely knew her. But she came back from placement as well. We didn't know anyone in the course. So we just kind of just looked at each other one day and were like, yeah, we'll be friends. So we were really pushing each other a lot. And, you know, we had a similar timetable where she worked quite a bit as well. So them first 2 units in the first year, I think I got 84% and 86%. And it was important to me before January, make sure that you smash it so that the next half of the year, it could be a lot more relaxed for you. Because that's when I was going to be really busy on work, and it worked out perfectly. I put a lot of pressure on myself, drove myself a little bit, put myself a little bit too much pressure, but in the end it all worked out.
You talked about mentors, you talked about the 1 million mentor scheme, and also Mark, your mentor. What advice would you give to students or any early career professionals about a mentor? What does a mentor do for you, would you say?
I think the first thing to kind of mention is it's easy, especially in the world that we live in now, to think that all the information that you can get is online. And it's easy to think that, I don't need someone giving me advice. And I think, you couldn't be more wrong in that way of thinking. A mentor can really change your life. And it can be a simple piece of insight, can really make a world of difference. So the first thing that I always remind myself is that I'm far from perfect, and life's about learning new things and thinking about things differently. So I was always more than happy to get a mentor. So it started off, my first mentor, I think, was through the 1 Million Mentors program. And what they really taught me was, saying yes to different opportunities, and you never know where things might lead. And if you say yes to one thing, well, that could lead to A, and then A could lead to B, and then C could lead to your dream job or whatever it may be. And I experienced that firsthand. But also another thing that I really learned from my mentors was being asked why. It's a simple question, but sometimes when you're talking to your mentor and you're explaining why you want to do something, and they ask you, well, why do you want to do that? And you can't answer the question, it really makes you reevaluate all your goals and your ambitions. And are you really doing this for yourself, or are you doing it for other people? Are you doing it for what people will think? Will this really benefit you in the future? Is this a waste of time? So I think a mentor can make a world of difference. Obviously, it's all about meeting the right mentor. When I first met my mentor, I remember them telling me one of the worst things that's ever happened in their lives. And I remember just sitting there thinking, I can be honest with this person. So really try to, especially early on, try to develop and get to know your mentor on a personal level and relate to them. Because, I'm a black 23-year-old man, and my best ever mentor was a white woman in her 60s. And I learned so much from her. And even if your life experiences are completely different, you can relate to anyone in different ways. So really try to put effort into your relationship and try to get to know your mentor on a personal level. And once you do that, kind of the world's your oyster. They'll be able to help you out with the little decisions in life. And I became, I've had mentors in an official capacity where I go through an organisation, or as simple as just asking someone that I really admire to have a conversation with me and discussing things with them. A mentor relationship can be as short as 2 conversations, or it can be as long as 2 or 3 years of mentoring. And I've had both of those. And, it's an opportunity to be honest with someone and for them to give you honest feedback.
So what does the future hold for you from now?
So at the moment, I'm working at the university as a project officer, and I'm in my 3rd week. I'm really enjoying it, but I have been thinking about the future, and I've been thinking about whether I want to, pursue a career in academia. I really love education, and I love the fact that access to education changed my life and can change so many others. But project work is what I enjoy. So I'm pursuing now, I'm starting my Prince 2 qualifications to be a project manager. And in the future, I think I want to be probably director of operations somewhere, hopefully one day, and maybe a CEO as well. So that's the plan.
Final question that I've got for you now. So knowing what you know now and everything that you've experienced and explained really well, I have to say, it was fantastic. What one piece of advice would you give that younger self of yours, perhaps the one that sat at sixth form college thinking, what am I going to do going forward? What one piece of advice would you give yourself knowing what you know now?
I think the one thing that I would say to my younger self is, even if I didn't know it, a lot of my insecurities were the reason why I was so nervous about life. So I think the first piece of advice, or the main piece of advice, would be relax. It's all about small steps in life. One day you're not going to change your life around and be the person that you want to be. So these small sustained steps of slowly building towards your goals and ambitions are so important. And I look back at myself when I was 18 and I think to myself, a lot of one of the main reasons why I pushed myself so much was because I didn't believe that I could succeed. And it couldn't have been further from the truth. So I think the first thing is to relax, but also focus on what you want in life, and make sure that every day, every week, you're making small steps towards achieving the goals that you want to achieve. And another thing that I would really advise myself to do, and I look back on, I think probably my one and biggest regret that I have, is not enjoying the life moments. You know, when I graduated a couple of weeks ago, and I went for breakfast by myself on my day of graduation, because I realised that in a lot of these moments, I don't actually reflect and think to myself, you've done well here. Every time I've achieved something, got a good grade, it's always what's next. You know, don't rest on your successes. But it is important to take them moments in, remember them, and be proud of yourself. And that helps you in sustaining that work ethic to take them small steps to succeed.
Really appreciate you spending the time with us today, Shuab. Thanks ever so much, and good luck for the future.
Thank you, Ian. It's been a pleasure.
There are several things I took from that interview. Firstly, I found it inspirational how Shuab, having been diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia early on, found a way of working with this learning disability by finding out what he was good at and working towards those set goals. He also clearly outlined the benefit of having a mentor even whilst you're studying. I sense that the future is really bright for him. Thanks to Shuab for his honesty and inspiring comments during the interview, and I'm sure we'll all wish him good luck with his future ventures. Links to Shuab's LinkedIn profile, 1 Million Mentors, and Manchester Met's First Generation scheme can also be found in the show notes. My thanks go to Manchester Metropolitan University Business School for sponsoring the series and allowing the episodes to be ad-free. A link to their course offerings can be found in the notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe to the series from wherever you get your pods. You can leave feedback via the various social media channels mentioned earlier by searching for Half Hour Mentor. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, bye for now.